$18 billion. That is the amount of federal tax liability Donald Trump avoided between 2015 and 2024 using a single accounting mechanism that exists nowhere in the tax code available to ordinary Americans. The number would become important exactly 31 minutes into a House Ways and Means Committee hearing on tax reform on March 25th, 2026, when a congresswoman from Texas asked the former president to explain how a man who claimed billions in real estate losses still managed to spend $197 million in cash during the same period. By the time the hearing ended, Trump would be gone. 6 pages of tax returns he swore under oath did not exist would be sitting on the witness table. What made him walk out? The answer is in the math. The House Ways and Means Committee chamber was packed beyond capacity that Tuesday morning. Donald Trump had been subpoenaed to testify about proposed reforms to real estate tax provisions, specifically the treatment of depreciation and loss carry forwards. He arrived 14 minutes late, surrounded by attorneys, and took his seat at the witness table with the air of a man who believed this was an inconvenience he would dispatch quickly. He wore a navy suit with an American flag pin and a red tie that hung slightly too long. His opening statement, delivered without notes, lasted 9 minutes and covered his business acumen, his success in real estate, his belief that he had paid more taxes than any president in history, and his opinion that the committee was wasting time on partisan harassment. I've built an incredible business, he said, leaning into the microphone with practiced ease. Billions and billions of dollars in assets. I've created thousands of jobs. I've paid hundreds of millions in taxes over my lifetime, more than probably anyone in this room. And now you want to change the rules because you don't like success. He gestured broadly. The tax code is complicated. I use the best accountants, the best lawyers. Everything I've done is legal. Everything. And if you don't like the laws, maybe you should have written better ones. When Jasmine Crockett's turn came to question him, Trump looked at her with barely concealed dismissal. Representative Crockett, he said before she could speak, I know who you are. I've seen you on television, always complaining, always attacking successful people. You've never built anything. You've never created a job. You've never signed the front of a paycheck, only the back. So when you sit there and want to lecture me about taxes, just remember I've forgotten more about business than you'll ever know. The room went silent in the way rooms go silent when someone has just made a tactical error they do not yet recognize. Crockett placed a brown accordion folder on the table in front of her. It was thick, bulging with documents, held closed with elastic bands. She removed the bands with slow, deliberate movements. Mr. Trump, she said, her voice quiet and level, I've spent 3 months preparing for exactly this moment. Let's talk about what you know and what you've forgotten. Trump leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. By all means, Representative. I'm sure this will be very educational. His attorney shifted slightly, but Trump waved them off with a small gesture that suggested he had this under control. Crockett opened the accordion folder and removed the first set of documents. They were held together with a binder clip and labeled with a tab that read, Trump Tax Returns 2015-2018. Mr. Trump, in your opening statement, you said you've paid hundreds of millions in taxes over your lifetime. You've made that claim repeatedly on social media, in interviews, during your campaigns, and just now under oath. She placed the first document face up. These are your federal tax returns for 2015 through 2018. They were obtained legally by this committee under Section 6103 of the Internal Revenue Code after a 3-year legal battle that went to the Supreme Court. She looked up. In 2015, you paid $641,931 in federal income taxes. In 2016, you paid $750. In 2017, you paid $750. In 2018, you paid $994.66. She paused. Those 4 years total $1,642,137 in federal income taxes. Not hundreds of millions, Mr. Trump. Less than $1. $7 million. And that's before we discuss the refunds. Trump's face had begun to redden. So those returns are incomplete. They don't show the full picture. I pay taxes to states, to cities. I pay property taxes. We're discussing federal income taxes, Mr. Trump, which is what you referenced in your opening statement when you said you've paid more than any president in history. But let's set that aside for now. Crockett removed the second set of documents from the folder. Let's talk about how you managed to pay so little despite reporting billions in income from various sources. The second document stack was thicker, perhaps 60 pages, spiral bound with tabs marking specific sections. This is an analysis prepared by the Joint Committee on Taxation of your tax returns from 2000 through 2024. 24 years of returns. The JCT is nonpartisan, Mr. Trump. Their analysis was conducted by career tax professionals, not by me. She opened to a tab page marked with yellow. The analysis identifies a pattern that appears consistently across all 24 years. You report enormous losses on your real estate holdings. We're talking about cumulative losses exceeding $4 billion between 2000 and 2020, which you then use to offset income from other sources, including your television contracts, licensing deals, and investments. Trump interjected, that's called depreciation. It's legal. Real estate values decline, buildings age. That's how the tax code works. It is legal, Mr. Trump. I'm not disputing that. What I'm questioning is the accuracy. Crockett turned to another tab section, this one marked in orange. The JCT analysis compared your reported property values on your tax returns where you claim massive losses and depreciation against your reported property values on loan applications to Deutsche Bank and Ladder Capital for the exact same properties in the exact same years. She placed two documents side by side on the table. Here is Trump Tower. On your 2015 tax return, you valued the commercial and retail portions at $327 million, claiming $41 million in losses and depreciation that year. On your loan application to Ladder Capital in 2015 for a $100 million refinancing, you valued the exact same commercial and retail portions at $527 million. She looked up, Mr. Trump, how can the same property be worth $327 million to the IRS and $527 million to your lender in the same year? The room was now completely silent except for the sound of cameras clicking and the low hum of the air circulation system. Trump's jaw worked for a moment before he spoke. Different appraisal methods, tax valuations and market valuations are different things. Any accountant will tell you different appraisal methods that result in a $200 million difference. On a single property, Crockett pulled out another comparison. Here's 40 Wall Street. On your 2016 tax return, valued at $88 million with reported losses of $7 million. On your loan documents to Deutsche Bank in 2016, valued at $540 million. Sawiri, she placed the documents next to each other. That's not a different appraisal method, Mr. Trump. That's a 13% difference. You're telling the IRS the property is worth $88 million while simultaneously telling a bank it's worth more than $500 million. She pulled out a third comparison. Trump National Doral. Tax return 2017, $75 million in reported losses on a property you valued at $125 million. Loan application 2017, property value listed as $420 million. Fourth comparison, Trump Park Avenue. Tax return value 2018, $29.5 million. Financial statement to lenders 2018, $135 million. Trump's hands, which had been resting on the table, curled into fists. You're cherry picking numbers and taking them out of context. I have hundreds of properties, thousands of assets. I have 16 properties here, Mr. Trump, and every single one shows the same pattern. Crockett's voice had not risen. If anything, it had become quieter, forcing the room to lean in. On average, across these 16 properties over 6 years, you reported values to the IRS that were 71% lower than the values you reported to lenders for the exact same properties in the exact same tax years. One of Trump's attorneys leaned forward and whispered urgently in his ear. Trump shook his head sharply, and the attorney sat back. This is a partisan witch hunt, Trump said, his voice rising. You're trying to make legal accounting look like something criminal. I use the tax code the way it's written. If there are deductions available, I take them. That's called being smart, not being a criminal. Crockett closed the spiral-bound analysis and opened another section of the accordion folder. What emerged was a single-page spreadsheet with numbers highlighted in yellow. Let's talk about being smart, Mr. Trump. She placed the spreadsheet where the cameras could see it clearly. This is a summary of your reported income and losses from 2015 to 2024, 10 years. The JCT analysis shows that during this period, you reported $1, $7 billion in total losses across your real estate holdings. She let that number sit in the air. Now, Mr. Trump, I want to make sure I understand something. You've claimed publicly that you're worth billions of dollars. You've said you're one of the most successful businessmen in history. You've written books about your business acumen, but according to your tax returns, you lost $1, $7 billion over 10 years. She looked up. So my question is simple. Are you a terrible businessman who actually lost $1, $7 billion, or are you misrepresenting your losses to avoid paying taxes? Which is it? Trump's face had gone from red to a deeper crimson. That's a false choice. You don't understand how real estate works. You have paper losses that don't reflect actual cash flow. Then let's talk about actual cash flow. Crockett was already reaching for another document before Trump finished speaking, because that's where this gets really interesting. The next document she produced was a financial analysis. This one prepared by a private forensic accounting firm, labeled clearly at the top, Trump cash expenditures 2015-2024. Mr. Trump, if you were actually losing $1, $7 billion over 10 years, you would be rapidly running out of cash. Real losses mean real money going out the door. But that's not what happened, is it? She opened the analysis. Between 2015 and 2024, you spent $197 million in documented cash purchases, $35 million to settle lawsuits, including $25 million for Trump University fraud claims, $78 million in cash for property purchases, including a $15 million estate in Scotland and a $28 million property in Aberdeen, $43 million in cash payments to contractors and suppliers, $41 million in campaign expenditures from personal funds that you claimed as personal expenses, not campaign contributions. She placed the analysis on top of the previous documents. That's $197 million in cash spending during the exact same period you claim $1. $7 billion in losses. So either you have access to cash that's not showing up anywhere in your tax returns, or those losses aren't real. And she leaned forward slightly. Which is it, Mr. Trump? Trump stood up from his chair. This is outrageous. You're taking confidential tax information and twisting it. It's not confidential anymore, Mr. Trump. The Supreme Court ruled this committee has legal authority to review and discuss these returns. You're under oath. So I'll ask again, where did the $197 million in cash come from if you were losing $1? $7 billion? Trump's attorneys were both leaning in now, speaking urgently, but Trump was not listening. I'm not going to sit here and be, lectured about business by someone who's never run anything more complicated than a law office. Crockett opened the final section of the accordion folder. Then let me show you what that law office figured out. What emerged from the folder was not a spreadsheet or an analysis. It was 6 pages of tax returns copied on official IRS paper with the distinctive watermark visible even in the overhead lights. Crockett held them up so the cameras could see the headers clearly. Form 1040, Donald J. Trump, 2019, 2020, 2021. Mr. Trump, these are your tax returns for 2019, 2020, and 2021. The returns you claimed under oath in a deposition in 2023 did not exist because you were under audit and they hadn't been finalized. And she placed them on the table with absolute precision. They exist, Mr. Trump. The IRS finalized them in 2022. You signed them, your accountant certified them, and they show something extraordinary. She opened to the 2020 return a page marked with a red tab. In 2020, you claimed a $73 million tax refund based on loss carrybacks from 2008 and 2009. The IRS paid you that refund. But then in 2020, you also reported $38 million in income from foreign sources, licensing deals in Dubai, Philippines, Indonesia, and Turkey, which you did not pay U.S. taxes on because you claimed those losses offset the income. On Shantimir Asi in Insane Bean, she looked up, and for the first time, her expression showed something that might have been anger, though it was wrapped in ice. Mr. Trump, you got a $73 million refund from the U.S. Treasury while simultaneously earning $38 million from foreign business deals that you paid 0 U.S. taxes on. You didn't just avoid paying taxes. You got paid by the government while making millions from foreign deals and reporting none of it as taxable income. The room erupted. Journalists began shouting questions. Committee members leaned into their microphones. Trump's attorneys were both standing, gesturing urgently. but the only sound that mattered was Trump's voice rising to a shout. Those are private returns. You have no right. This is illegal. It's completely legal, Mr. Trump. Section 6103. Your own Supreme Court appointees agreed. Crockett had not raised her voice. But let's get to the real number, because we started with 18 billion, and I want to show you how we got there. Insane. She pulled out one final spreadsheet, this one a single page with a number circled in red at the bottom. The Joint Committee on Taxation Analysis calculated what you would have paid in federal income taxes from 2015 to 2024 if you had reported your properties at the same values to the IRS that you reported to your lenders. Not inflated values, not deflated values, the exact same values. She placed the spreadsheet on top of the pile of returns. The difference between what you actually paid and what you would have paid using consistent valuations is $4 billion in avoided federal tax liability over 10 years. She let the number hang in the air. $18 billion, Mr. Trump. That's not a loophole. That's not smart accounting. That's potential fraud on a scale that would make Al Capone blush. Trump's face had gone beyond red to something approaching purple. His hands were shaking. This is a kangaroo court. This is a partisan attack. I will not sit here and be accused of crimes by people who I haven't accused you of any crimes, Mr. Trump. I've simply presented your tax returns and asked you to explain the inconsistencies. If there are crimes here, that's for the Department of Justice to determine. I'm just asking questions. Crockett gathered the documents into a neat stack. But since you brought up accusations, let me ask you one final question. She folded her hands on top of the documents. You opened this hearing by attacking my qualifications. You said I've never built anything, never created jobs, never signed the front of a paycheck. You said you've forgotten more about business than I'll ever know. She paused for 5 full seconds. The room held its breath. Mr. Trump, I'm a civil rights attorney from Texas. I've never claimed to be a business genius. But in 3 months, with access to documents you fought for 3 years to keep hidden, I found $18 billion in tax discrepancies that your accountants, your lawyers, and the IRS apparently missed or ignored for a decade. Another pause. So my final question is this. If I'm so unqualified and you're such a stable genius, how did I find what you swore under oath didn't exist? The silence that followed was absolute. No cameras clicked. No one whispered. The entire chamber seemed to have stopped breathing. Trump's mouth opened, closed, opened again. His hands, still resting on the table, had begun to tremble visibly. 10 seconds, 15. At 20 seconds, Trump pushed his chair back with enough force that it rolled backward and hit the wall behind him. And this hearing is a joke, he said, his voice hoarse and strained. I'm not going to dignify the circus with any more of my time. My lawyers will be filing complaints about the illegal release of confidential tax information. You people are going to regret this. He stood and turned toward the exit. His attorneys scrambled to gather their papers, whispering urgently to each other. The committee chairman called out, Mr. Trump, you're still under subpoena. Trump did not stop. He walked toward the door with stiff, rapid movements, his face still that dangerous shade of purple red, his hands clenched at his sides. The cameras followed every step. He reached the door. One of his attorneys held it open. And Donald Trump, who had entered the hearing, confident and combative, who had dismissed Jasmine Crockett as unqualified and ignorant, walked out of a congressional hearing while still under oath, still under subpoena, unable to answer the simplest question about how a man who lost billions still had millions in cash to spend. The door closed behind him. The room sat in stunned silence for approximately 3 seconds. Then chaos erupted. Journalists rushed for the exits. Committee members shouted questions at each other. The chairman gavelled desperately for order. Crockett remained seated. The documents were still stacked neatly in front of her. The accordion folder was still open. She had not moved. A reporter from CNN managed to shout a question that was picked up by the microphones. Representative Crockett, were you expecting him to walk out? Crockett looked up. For the first time that morning, something that might have been a smile crossed her face. It was not triumphant. It was not celebratory. It was the expression of someone who had predicted exactly this outcome and had been proven correct. Yes, she said simply. The hearing continued without Trump for another 90 minutes. Other witnesses testified. Tax experts explained the technical aspects of the discrepancies Crockett had identified. A representative from the IRS confirmed that the returns were authentic and that an investigation into the valuation inconsistencies was now being opened. But none of that mattered as much as the footage that was already viral before the hearing even ended. Trump attacking Crockett's qualifications, Crockett opening folder after folder, the $18 billion number revealed, Trump's 20-second silence, his face going purple, his hands shaking. And finally, the image of him walking out the door while a junior congresswoman from Texas sat calmly at the witness table, surrounded by documents he had sworn did not exist. By evening, the video had been viewed 42 million times. Political analysts called it the most dramatic congressional walkout in modern history. Legal experts debated whether Trump's departure while under subpoena could constitute contempt of Congress. Tax professionals dissected the $18 billion calculation and almost universally agreed that the math was sound. But in the places where real Americans watched, in living rooms and break rooms, on phones and tablets, in the comment sections and group chats, what resonated most was not the tax complexity or the legal implications. It was the simple, devastating arc of the confrontation. A powerful man who had built his entire identity on being smarter than everyone else. A young black woman he dismissed as unqualified and ignorant. 3 months of homework. 6 pages of tax returns he said didn't exist. One question he couldn't answer, and a door closing behind him as he fled. The Department of Justice announced the following morning that it was opening a formal investigation into potential tax fraud based on the discrepancies identified in the hearing. The IRS announced a comprehensive audit of all Trump Organization entities for tax years 2015 through 2024. The New York Attorney General, who had been pursuing a separate civil fraud case, filed an emergency motion to freeze Trump Organization assets pending the outcome of the federal investigation. But for Jasmine Crockett, sitting in her office that evening, reviewing the hearing transcript and preparing her formal report to the committee, the moment that mattered most was not Trump's walkout or the investigations it triggered or even the $18 billion number that would follow him for the rest of his life. It was the moment before he stood up. The moment when he sat there in silence, unable to explain how a man who lost billions had millions to spend, unable to explain why his properties were worth $88 million to the IRS and $540 million to Deutsche Bank, unable to explain where the $197 million in cash came from, unable to explain anything except through silence and then flight. You said, "I've never built anything, Mr. Trump," the hearing record would show she had said in her closing statement delivered after he left. You said, "I don't understand business." You said, "I've never signed the front of a paycheck." All of that is true. But what I have done is this. I've read, I've studied, I've requested documents, and I've cross-referenced them. I've done the homework you assume no one would do because you've spent decades getting away with not doing it yourself. You entered this hearing believing your bluster and your dismissiveness and your claim business genius would be enough. You thought I was just another critic you could insult into silence. But I wasn't asking for your opinion, Mr. Trump. I was asking you to explain the math, and you couldn't because the math doesn't lie. Buildings don't change value by 513% depending on whether you're talking to the IRS or a bank. You don't lose $7 billion and still have $197 million in cash unless those losses aren't real. You don't get a $73 million refund while making $38 million in foreign income and paying 0 U.S. taxes unless something is very, very wrong. The framework of the tax code exists for a reason. Depreciation schedules exist for a reason. Valuation consistency requirements exist for a reason. These rules aren't bureaucratic annoyances invented to make successful people feel bad. They're the foundation of a tax system that depends on honest reporting because the alternative is oligarchy, where the powerful play by different rules than everyone else and the Treasury becomes a piggy bank for whoever is rich enough to hire creative enough accountants. You walked out of this hearing, Mr. Trump, because you couldn't answer the questions, and in doing so, you answered them anyway. The $18 billion stands. The investigations proceed. And the American people now know what you fought for 3 years to hide, that the self-proclaimed business genius who lectured everyone about success has been avoiding taxes on a scale that would be criminal for anyone else. I didn't need to build a business empire to figure that out, Mr. Trump. I just needed to read your tax returns and ask why the numbers don't match. Turns out that was enough.